The Boston College Chief Executives Club is the country's premier business forum, connecting world-class CEOs to their counterparts in Boston's business community. Tonight, Steve Easterbrook, President and CEO of McDonald's, speaks to the Chief Executives Club. This broadcast is brought to you by the law firm of McCarter and English, the exclusive sponsor of the Chief Executives Club series on NECN.
I'll try and set the scene if I can and just give you a little bit of a peek under the tent of what we've been trying to do the last couple of years. Because we've got a business that's, we like to call it 62 years young, but we were showing sort of some dangerous signs of aging. So there's a few things we've undertaken, and I'm not going to do a laundry list of the kind of the business stuff, but more just talk about almost the mentality, the kind of cultural approach we've tried to take to get the business like ours moving. So hopefully that'll create some interesting and dynamic Q&As as we get going. So I start internally in a lot of our discussions the very same way, which is what's driving this kind of a restless energy I have and an urgency I have to try and evolve our business the way we are. And I'll put it this way, and then I'll explain why I look at it this way. If this very same group was sat here 5 years ago, and any one of us happened to be stood here, and we were to say, who would guess in 5 years' time that the largest taxi company in the world does not own a single car and does not employ a single driver? You'd have kind of shaken your head and think they've had too much of a liquid lunch. Or that the largest department store in the world doesn't have a single storefront. Or that the largest provider of overnight accommodation does not own a single hotel, doesn't own a single room, doesn't actually own a single bed. And that's Airbnb. Or that the largest provider or show of films does not own a single movie theatre or cinema, doesn't have a single screen, Netflix. And the reason I say this is not because technology is disrupting the world, which clearly it is, but why is it relevant to a business like ours, which is these were really traditional industries getting disrupted. This wasn't the creation of new industries. It was technology disrupting it. You know, the bricks and mortar of the hotel industry, the bricks and mortar of department stores, the tradition of the taxi companies. So in amongst that somewhere was, I thought, a warning signal that we are in a very traditional business. And you might as well expect it to get disrupted. And there's a really good chance that technology will be part of the disrupting mechanism. So the attitude was, do you wait to get disrupted, or do you try and become the disruptor within the industry and lead that and anticipate it and move before you get caught? So that's part of some of the, if you like, the mental approach that we've taken to what we have ahead of us. So again, we can talk about this world now, which is one which is entirely, and you will all see this in your businesses, of all the varying and the great diversity of businesses represented here today, is hyper-connected. It's a one-touch society. Everything is one swipe away. There's more information available than ever. There's more stakeholder groups than you can possibly imagine. And that brings heightened expectations of all of us and of everyone in business. And so that whole disruptive and the speed of the disruption is something that we all need to embrace, and we need to work out how we can best embrace that and bring that to our businesses without losing the heritage and the values and the core of what you actually stand for and what really matters. So again, the very simple way, and hopefully this will come across as we just chat with each other, I always try and bring everything back to as simple a description as you possibly can, because that probably gives you the best chance of being understood, certainly within an organisation like ours, which is, this isn't about being a different McDonald's, it's just being about a better McDonald's. A business that's more modern, has this restless energy to keep innovating in a way that our history, we have a rich history, has always done. So yeah, we really did try and gain confidence from our past and our heritage, but actually not rely on it. And perhaps we've just been relying on our past for a little too long. And the reality is the world outside of McDonald's was changing quicker than the world inside McDonald's, and that's never a great equation for any business, and we were getting caught. So we wanted to rely on those fundamental strengths and say the heritage, the brand assets that we have. But then how can we better and more meaningfully communicate in ways to customers that they care about and they take notice of? And when we do make a positive change at McDonald's, it can be incredibly rewarding because, and this is not about, I'm not trying to impress with the scale of the stats, but it's more, again, the mindset behind it. If we serve around 27 million people a day in the US, if you're a little bit better tomorrow than you were today, a lot of people notice quite quickly. And if you're even better the next week, more people notice it very quickly. If you make meaningful change in and around the restaurants, your ability for the customer perception to recognize that the business is on the move is that much greater. So, and we can draw upon our successes in the past to give us the confidence that we can continue to do that in the future. So I was just going to come up with a couple of examples of what I mean by that. When we introduce certain food or certain technology or certain concepts, it can often become ubiquitous through society as well. And whilst nowadays I don't think McDonald's wouldn't come to the top of people's lists as being one of the most innovative companies in the world. Probably not today, because there's a lot of other fast-moving, very challenging, very progressive businesses out there, particularly in technology. But think about when we first developed and launched the drive-through. So we're talking 45 plus years ago. That was incredibly innovative because restaurants at best would drive to. There wasn't much of an eating out culture anyway. But the idea of recognizing that car ownership was something that was becoming more available to the average families, and then adapting an operation that was only set up to manufacture and do car hops and deliver and sort, but to then wrap a drive-through lane around it and still trying to deliver all the sorts of things you're trying to do, was incredibly innovative. And of course, that has now transgressed all sorts of industries, from libraries to pharmacies to dry cleaners and the rest. I'll give you one other example, again, which I always think is interesting to reflect on, because again, it becomes so matter-of-fact in the current day that you don't think back to someone somewhere made some really brave decisions and has established societal change. We were certainly one of the first, I'm not claiming to be the first, but certainly at scale, to make eating out at breakfast a very regular thing. Because typically everyone would always have breakfast at home, restaurants would open mid-late morning, and there would be a traditional, that would be the day part. But then people's working patterns start to change over time, and travel changes, and people's mode of travel changes, and people's desire to get into work or avoid the changes, and therefore you end up creating an entirely new culture and an entirely new way that people can eat and consume, if you like, in that day part. So I think we've just got these interesting decisions. That was not an easy decision, because you're then ready to go from a business that runs on 2 shifts a day to 3 shifts a day. It starts slow. It's a totally different supply chain. There's more complication on the operations, and it's not profitable in the early days. Whereas now here in the US, it's more than 20% of our business, so it's a substantial part of our overall business mix. We can do stuff with supply chain, which I think is a responsibility that comes with a leader, and size and scale has to be used for good, as far as I'm concerned. And again, a nice recent example was our US team last year made the commitment that we would shift the 2 billion eggs that we buy every year in the US to cage-free. Now, there is not sufficient production for 2 billion cage-free eggs in the US because the industry hasn't been set up that way. But we said that's the commitment, and we're going to be a true customer to that commitment. And if it takes 10 years, it takes 10 years. But we're going to start here, 1%, 2%, we're going to get to 100% within 10 years. And what happens is the egg industry then sits up and takes notice. And we've been told by the Humane Society The 3 weeks subsequent to our announcement, 140 other national chains also made their commitment, which then means the egg producing industry further there's acceleration, and that's a nice example of using size and scale for good that I think is also very important for a business like ours. It's a responsibility we have. So we're here today and we're looking to how else can we disrupt? What's going to come and disrupt us? How else can we disrupt? So I don't know if this is going to be the answer, but we're just trying something which I think is interesting just the last 2 or 3 weeks. It is in the public domain, so this is no secret, but it's maybe the pace at which we're embracing an opportunity, and we will learn, and we'll learn to a level where it'll be a go or a no-go, is that we want to play a more meaningful part in the home food delivery, which is already a pretty established but rapidly growing, as convenience only becomes a greater expectation in people's lives and consumers' lives. So we're working with Uber Eats down in Florida. First week of January, we had 10 restaurants on the test, which was really just an operational test. Because one of the questions I asked, why are we testing whether people want food delivered to them at home? I think we know the answer to that. And smarter people than me came back, well, we need to make sure that you can collect the order, you can go into the kitchen, we can produce it, and when the driver turns up. So there was an operational test. Last week, we extended that to 100. This week, we extended it to 200 restaurants. And I use that as an example of just, again, size and scale for us has often been an excuse for moving slowly. And I'm really, really keen and energized to try and demonstrate both within our business and certainly to customers that we can be as nimble and as agile if we put our mind to it. And I think that's really important in this current kind of business climate. So the last couple of years, I think we've probably tried to squeeze about 4 or 5 years worth of change into 2 years, and it's been tough. You know, you can celebrate the decisions that help drive the business, get great customer recognition, create the fun headlines, but also there's a lot of tougher decisions, and you all know this because we're all living through the realities of business life. So, yeah, we've had to right size. I would call it right size our structure, and change the way that we were structured from the operational side of the business on a global level, and totally carved up from what I felt was an old-fashioned area of the world structure to one where we segment markets in ways that are much more similar and allows the transfer of knowledge to go. I won't go into any more, but I can comfortably talk more about that at Q&A. We had to work hard to put the right talent in place, both in the restaurants where we were running too tight on staff, because guess what, if sales are struggling, one of the costs you can control a little bit better is maybe have one less person on the shift, and then the service starts to slip away. And how could we instill the confidence in our owner operators and our company people to let staff for the growth we believe we're going to generate, as opposed to just trying to staff to make a dime today. So, and also at a corporate level across and you would all have been through many of these, I felt it as much as we had valued the tenure and the experience of a very experienced management team, we only knew what we knew, and we're beginning to repeat conversations too much. So there's been a lot of change at the corporate level as well, where we created some opportunities for our younger talent to come through and take leadership positions, and also introduced 3 or 4 key positions, particularly on the more creative consumer-facing side, from some I feel, world-class talent to come in and join our business. So there's been a structure piece we had to work on. There's a talent piece from a restaurant all the way through to a management team and up and down the organisation. But also, as can happen when you're looking to try and unlock growth in a business, and you can start to flail around a little bit and try and do too much. And bringing focus back into a business like ours is not easy, because we're in 120 different countries. We've got 5,500 owner-operators around the world, and everyone has an opinion. Everyone has more than one opinion. So how do you galvanize people? And again, just to give you a flavor of the simplicity which I'm hoping acts as a filter for decision-making in our business, is if we just stay absolutely laser-like focused on bringing the biggest benefit to the most customers in the shortest space of time, that will hopefully filter out some of the other periphery stuff, which can be very distracting and can dilute all the benefit of what you're trying to do. So we spend a lot of time on just trying to do fewer, bigger decisions. And we've already had one or two conversations here on the way through. One great example was when here in the US, which is a great one to champion, and I champion internally a lot, was when the team went to move to all-day breakfast. It was the most highly requested move from a customer perspective, and it has been for about the last 10, 15 years. But operationally, we always had reasons why we couldn't. And I didn't care how many reasons there were why you couldn't, when the one reason why you should is because that's what customers want most. So we decided we were going to cleanse a lot of the other activity going on in the business, and if we all put our efforts onto how you can make this work and how you can make it better and bigger, and it's on the customer's agenda, the chance of us getting getting kind of business lift you need, and that has become, I think, more of a clarion call within our business of fewer, bigger decisions, and make sure it's on the customer agenda as much as you possibly can. So moving quickly, and Mike mentioned trying to take risks, take smarter risks, and again, it's any one of us as leaders of our businesses can stand up and say this stuff, but actually, if you can get the tangible actions and demonstrate it through meaningful action, again, always on the customer agenda, then I'll just give you one more example. Again, I'm only sharing these because it may just trigger conversation later through Q&A. This was in 2015, and Apple came to us. So Apple know what we could bring to some of their initiatives, because we are in 14,500 communities around the US. And our owner operators, we employ 900,000 people here in the US. And also, as I say, we serve 27 million people a day. So they wanted to launch Apple Pay and try and introduce a whole new method of payment. And they asked us, would we be interested in being a launch partner for Apple Pay? And I mean, clearly the answer is yes, but they have a launch date, as you know. They have these big events in Cupertino. They gave us 12 weeks' notice. Not to come back with a decision of whether we're interested, but to get it done and implemented and executed in 14,000 restaurants from a technology point of view, from a crew training point of view, and the rest. And we decided we were going to use this totally as a wonderful opportunity to test ourselves as how good can we be if we rally behind something and show the sort of urgency. And you know, none of these things are perfect, but if you think about the sort of discussion, so this is the funny thing about McDonald's, like when it comes to it, we're a real grassroots nuts and bolts type of business. So the biggest challenge we had on the entire 12 weeks was dealing with customers and handling customers who want to pay with Apple Pay in restaurant, not a problem. Here's the problem, it's the drive-through customer. Because when they come on pay, they want to pull up the drive-through window and they want to wave a phone. But you don't want them to pass the phone to you to handle, because there's all sorts of liability issues with that. And then the scanner is in the drive-through booth, and you know, the scanner's there next to our POS system. So we had to find a way to get the scanner effectively on a pretty crude arm that would lever out of the window, such that the driver, if it was their watch or if it was their phone, would be able to hold against the scanner. They were in total control of the entire process. They had full ownership of it, and we were able to capture the payment. So the biggest problem was manufacturing these arms. It wasn't the technology, it was how, not just manufacturing them, but then getting them installed in, I guess out of 14,500, it's around 11,500, 12,000 drive-throughs. And then getting our crew trained on it. So anyway, I share that partly because it's kind of part of the nuts and bolts sort of discussions we end up having around our business. But actually, the great news was we got it done, and we were a launch partner for Apple Pay, which again, I think disrupted people's thinking about, I didn't see McDonald's being on the forefront of this type of technology. I didn't think they could move that quickly. And you know what? Externally, is it a huge business builder? It will be over time. But actually, internally, as a cultural signal to ourselves about what we can do when we adopt the right attitude. It's something that, as you can imagine, I do come back to a few times. So I'm going to begin to wrap up. So we're beginning to see the revitalization come through. We've had 6 quarters now in a row of global comparable sales growth and earnings growth and all the other sort of important things that come with it after a fairly sustained period of decline. So there's some confidence that's beginning to come back into the business. There's some behaviours and, if you like, the mentality within which we as leaders right across the world in our business are beginning to consider what our capabilities are, is beginning to be restored. That certainly feels good and gives me a whole heap of confidence. And also, for a business that has been so set in its ways, slowly but surely, and we are just a couple of steps into this journey, we're beginning to see our culture change, where change is seen as an energizer rather than a threat. And that is something which is really hard to do, because you can say all these things, but trying to get that into every single person right the way through a complex, global matrix organization like ours will take time. And as I say, whilst often in business we will always focus on the things we need to improve, the mistakes we made, correcting that, one thing I have tried to do is to champion the successes if they signal the kind of behaviours that we want to be employing across our leadership teams. So hopefully that's kind of set a scene. Normally Q&As on McDonald's go in weird and wonderful directions. Okay, so I'm totally embracing of that. I don't mind. There's nothing off limits. But as was mentioned in the setup, there's a couple of important dates coming up. There's one this weekend, and I did come into Boston last night because I wanted to have dinner with a whole group of our owner-operator leaders and with the team here, with our local regional leadership team. And they wanted to make sure that I was in no doubt, as on Sunday, who I should be rooting for. And to make sure I retained ownership of the shirt, they also made sure. But, so I hope you all have fun on Sunday, and I'm heading down to Atlanta this afternoon. I'm going to say exactly the same to them as well. And this is not meant to be a rather sort of a weak attempt at product placement, but on our way out today, you'll all be able to enjoy a celebration of another date, which I think Bostonians celebrate harder than almost anyone else. Because around the middle of March, there's a fun occasion, and we start our promotional activity on this, actually, I think it's today, and we launch next week. It'll be the return of the Shamrock Shake, with there's a twist where we'll be doing a chocolate Shamrock Shake as well. So help yourselves on the way out, and that's not trying to hurry the Q&A, but just know that there will be something there, and we've got a team out the back there who's going to take care of you all. So look, that's me done. Why don't we open things up to Q&A?
Everybody wants to ask and comment on minimum wage.
If we all have the fundamental premise that you always want to take care of your people and pay fair and give them opportunities, let's start with that. I think we all start with that in all of our businesses. What you want to do, what we do need to be mindful of, is that we don't raise things to a level where there's unintended consequences. Because the one thing I would proudly say, and I've adopted a different approach to this than perhaps McDonald's would have said in the past. I don't want to claim, and I don't think we should claim, so I don't think it's credible to be the world's best employer or the number one employer of choice. What I would say, and our US team, I thought had a really nice tone of voice to it at the end of last year, was America's best first job. And I think that's great. I can stand really, really firm behind that and say, if this is your first entry in the workplace, the flexibility, the training, the development, the opportunity, if you move on, which the majority of people will, that's totally fine as long as you've had a good start. But if you do want to have a career, we'll make sure there's a career route for you. So I think we just need to be mindful that we don't end up with unintended consequences where we almost price that entry-level job to a level where it becomes difficult for businesses, whether it's us or anyone else, to manage.
Are you thinking about a day when your restaurants would have no humans in the process further back? And how is your ATM working as a bank?
The reality is we're in a service business, so I don't ever see there being a day when there's no humans. What I can see is us being able to redirect where we have our employees work in the restaurants. So here in Boston, for example, there's across the US, across the globe, we're rolling out something we're calling the experience of the future. Is how we're introducing self-order kiosks in dining areas, embracing technology, offering table service, and basically offering customers more ways to order, more variations in the food they can order, more ways to pay, and more options as to how they're served. Everything from, if you order in advance on your phone, if you pull into a parking lot with geo-fencing there, we'll recognize you there, we'll say welcome, is this you, Steve? Quarter pounder with cheese, you ready to place the order? And you just hit a button, yes, and you pull into a bay and we bring it out to you. There's different things we're trying. So I love using technology when it takes non-value added roles out of a business like ours, because there's lots of processes. I mean, and you repeat them millions of times every day because you're serving 27 million customers and you've got 14,000 restaurants. So if you can take non-value added stuff out through technology, absolutely gets my vote. The customer service side is where the value add is. So I think what we'll end up doing is reallocating labor from, if I use McDonald's language, behind the front counter and trying to move it increasingly in front of the front counter on the customer side and actually use the opportunity to raise the experience levels. The ATM was, I think, a fun local initiative that the team set up here. It was a one-day event which was really to kick off the Big Mac promotion that we've got now, which is around extending the range of Macs to a Grand Mac and a Mac Junior, and obviously the iconic Big Mac. So I think they had some fun with it. The idea was to create a bit of a buzz, and I think it's fair to say they did. Thank you.
The Boston College Chief Executives Club is the country's premier business forum, connecting world-class CEOs to their counterparts in Boston's business community. This broadcast is brought to you by the law firm of McCarter & English, the exclusive sponsor of the Chief Executives Club on NECN.